three varieties of broccoli planted in our raised bed cold crop garden: Bacchus, Pinnacle, and Green Comet. The Green Comet is just starting to make a head. Now we also have cauliflower and two kinds of cabbage in here. We want to keep these green and growing. The secret to getting good harvest off of cold crops is to grow big, healthy plants. So we need to side dress them with some high nitrogen fertilizer. Now in side dressing, it's really just a simple matter of giving a little extra fertilizer around the edges of the plant. If you had a straight row, you'd just dribble it down beside the plant. But since we have staggered plantings in a raised bed, I want to put it in a circle roughly around each plant. Approximately a tablespoon of 3400 fertilizer will do just fine. You might have noticed I cultivated this beforehand, and that will help the fertilizer to wash in a little better. It also helps keep your cold crops cultivated, get plenty of oxygen down into the soil, and to keep the weeds down. The cabbage is just starting to make a head. Our cauliflower has a little ways to go yet. That should about finish it up. Hopefully the rain will wash it in for us. Well, let's get to that blueberry patch. If you missed our show last week, my co-host Jim Gallett said goodbye. He's moved back to his native New England to take a job in the apple industry. However, in a couple of months, Ray Campbell, who did Oklahoma gardening for 8 years, will be back with me as a permanent co-host. Well, these blueberries are getting kind of pale, and it indicates to me that they need some extra nitrogen fertilizer. Now, fertilizing blueberries should be done in the springtime, usually before they leaf out. However, if you don't feel you got enough on then, if the leaves are turning a pale yellow, or when they leaf out are not turning a deep green that they need to be, that means that they need some additional nitrogen fertilizer. Now, newly planted blueberries should not be fertilized until 6 weeks after they are planted, because you have some very tender roots trying to develop just beneath the soil line, and you don't want to take a risk of burning that brand new root system as the plant tries to get established. Now, these blueberry plants are into their third summer here, and that tells me that they're going on 3 years old. So the amount of fertilizer we'd put on would be approximately 1 tablespoon for each year of age. The type of fertilizer I'm using is ammonium nitrate, because we've had a soil test done and the acidity here is just fine. If you've had the blueberries tested, if you've had the soil in your blueberries tested and it's creeping back up again out of the 5 to 5.5 range, that means you probably should use a fertilizer that will help acidify the soil. And a good one is ammonium sulfate. It's 2100, which means it's 21% nitrogen, but it also contains 18% sulfur, and that will help drop that pH down again. And as with the broccoli that we did a few minutes ago, you just scatter it around. Looks like we've got some more rain coming in, so that'll help wash this in. Since this is in its third leaf, I'm going to put 3 tablespoons around the plants. And that's an easy way to remember. Just add an extra tablespoon per year of age. Now, one of our blueberries on the end there is a rabbit eye. That's why it looks quite a bit different than the others. Well, I'm going to finish these up, and then we'll meet back again over at our cattle panel trellis and see what varieties of cucumbers and melons we're going to plant around it. To save space in our raised bed gardens, we've decided to do some vertical growing this summer. We've taken one of our cattle panels and put a trellis up in the center here, secured it on either end with a steel T-post, and in the center with some lighter weight posts that are normally used for electric fencing. But this should work just great for growing our vine crops. Now you may be wondering what this is in the background. With growing cucumbers, a lot of times if you can get them up and growing without any pressure from insects, they'll do much better. And an easy way to do that is to use some Remay, which is a spun polyester fabric. We've talked a lot about it on the show before as a frost protection, but it's also great to use as an insect protection. Now under here I have one hill planted of Sprint 440 No. 2 cucumber, and to protect it from cucumber beetles and aphids until it starts to bloom and needs bees for pollination, I'm going to keep it covered over with the remay. This may look like a tremendous expense of material or a big waste of it, but it was the easiest way we could figure to get it up and over the trellis, give a good enclosure, but not allow the wind to press the fabric or rub the fabric back and forth against the leaves as they start to sprout. So that's our plan for this summer, and right here I'm going to see how well that one fares. The rest we'll just plant in the traditional manner. Now most of these seeds, all these in fact, are planted on the south-facing side of this trellis. This trellis runs east to west. They're on the south-facing side, so the prevailing winds will blow them back against the wire and help them grow up onto it. There I had some cucumbers planted. This is some Hearts of Gold variety cantaloupe. Again, as with any vine crop planting, you don't want to plant them too deeply. And plant several there, you can always go back and thin them out. Now in the cantaloupe, once they grow up on the trellis, the vines will handle it just fine, but the fruit will be pretty heavy. Hearts of Gold variety gets to be about 3 pounds. So we'll be rigging up a sling for that with old pantyhose or netting or something from wire to help hold the fruits up there. The cucumbers, on the other hand, can handle it just fine. In fact, it's a great way to get nice, straight cucumbers. This next variety is Sweet Slice Hybrid. Good flavor, hardly any bitterness. And then this is Marketer variety cucumber. Got several of those. If you've built a raised bed garden like this, the only limit to figuring more ways to get crops in there is your imagination. So just let your imagination run wild and figure ways to grow as vertically as possible. Now on the end here, we had a little extra space left over because our bed is about 19 feet of growing space and the cattle panel is 16 feet. So I've got another extra 3 feet here. I'm just going to do a hill of Sunworld variety early yellow crookneck squash. If you're like me, you don't usually can summer squash. You usually just eat it fresh, either in salads or stir-fried or lightly steamed. So one plant is usually plenty. I put 3 seeds in there and I'll go back and thin it out. Now down the length of the north side of this raised bed, I've decided to put in our second planting of lettuce for the summer. We have a good planting in another bed. This will be my second planting, and a third planting will go in under our pole beans later on. The north side of this will probably be pretty much blocked from the wind as the vine crops start to grow. And the lettuce that I'm planting, this particular variety right here is Prize Head. It'll be ready in 45 days. And we won't really be having any real hot temperatures between now and then, hopefully. So I'll just sow a little short row of it. Thin that out as it grows. I can eat the thinnings. And then in about 45 days, go ahead and harvest plenty for several salads. Now, another advantage to being on the back side of this trellis is that if I find the weather is getting really hot, as the vine crops are growing up here, they will not have reached the top yet, and I can always take some more remay or some shade cloth, drape it from the top of the trellis, and then secure it down to the sides of the raised bed. And that will provide shade and keep the plants cooler and extend my harvest season just a little bit longer. This next variety is Black-Seeded Simpson, which is a well-adapted variety of lettuce for here in Oklahoma. We had about an inch of rain here last night before we started taping, so our soil is really wet today, but fortunately in the raised beds we're able to get into them. That's the nice part about them. Well, I have some radishes to plant and then some buttercrunch lettuce. When I'm finished there, I'll show you a way to cut your own homegrown poles for planting some pole beans.